The Gospel of Matthew, chapter 22. Then the Pharisees went and plotted to entrap him, Jesus, in what he said. So they sent their disciples to him along with the Herodians, saying, "Teacher, we know that you are sincere and teach the way of God in accordance with truth, and show deference to no one, for you do not regard people with partiality. Tell us, then, what you think. Is it lawful to pay taxes to the emperor or not?" But Jesus, aware of their malice, said, "Why are you putting me to the test, you hypocrites? Show me the coin used for the tax." And they brought him a denarius. And then he said to them, "Whose head is this, and whose title?" And they answered, "The emperor's." And then he said to them, "Give therefore to the emperor the things that are the emperor's, and to God the things that are God's." When they heard this, they were amazed, and they left him and went away. The Gospel of the Lord. Next weekend, Ohio State takes the field for the first time this season. As an alumni, I'm obviously real excited about that. Sometimes I get a little too excited during these games. There have been games where I sometimes just go to bed without even watching the rest of it because my heart just can't take it. Sometimes I catch myself hollering at the TV as if the players can hear me and desperately need my advice. Sadly, sometimes my weekend is made terrible or great based on the outcome of a game played by 18 to 22-year-olds. Something completely out of my control is in charge of my emotions. So based on that, you can imagine what happens when I watch my kids play. Porter's high school basketball team went all the way to state this year. By the championship game, I was more nervous than he was. I really couldn't sit around anyone during the games because I was so uptight and overtaken with emotion. Because they had a real shot at winning state. And I wanted them to win so bad to get that ring. I just couldn't imagine what would happen if they didn't. If they didn't, all of his hopes, who am I kidding, all of my hopes would be lost. And looking back, as parents raising our children, Sandy and I pined over things like which teacher our kids would have next year, or how to make sure they get the best grades they could. We pushed them to excel in everything that they did. When it came to sports, we hoped they would make the team, pine over that, and then we'd worry about how much playing time they would get. It seems like the anxiety just never stopped. The same thing with the kids to varying degrees. They would be all consumed in sports activities or school, trying to excel in what they did and being pulled several different directions all at once. Looking even further back for us, before children, Sandy and I were on the treadmill, as they say, working hard for that next promotion, or getting ahead, as my dad used to put it. We were in graduate school and working full-time, juggling papers and workload from our jobs. And now, as I've gotten older, my worries turn to the future and where we are headed as a community, as a country, as a world. What's going to happen after the elections about racial tension, balance of power, healthcare, the economy, our national debt, and on and on and on. Or you may have other things that you're worried about too, like health concerns, loss of a loved one, or things that really get your blood flowing, keep you up at night. And even if we're not vocal about all these different things to others, we cannot help but get wrapped up inside about them and let them bother us. And when we look back on these things, we might not understand why that became so important or caused us so much strife in our lives. But at the time, it seems like the end of the world if it doesn't work out the way that it should, doesn't it? These things of the world are important to us. We cannot just ignore them because we live amongst them every day. In the text for today, the religious leaders try to use this fact to trick Jesus. They use this common everyday occurrence of obligation to pay taxes to Caesar in their trap. They must have thought to themselves, we have him on this one. We'll ask him this question, is it lawful to pay taxes to the emperor or not? And it's a simple yes or no answer. He has nowhere to go, they probably thought. If he says yes, then his followers, who are extremely unhappy under Roman rule, would be upset or emotional at the suggestion that they should pay taxes directly to someone keeping them down, their oppressor in that matter. If Jesus says no, don't pay the taxes, then he would be defying Caesar, which would have instantly allowed the Pharisees to build a case against him to the Romans. So he really has no place to go. But Jesus answers them in a masterful way that articulated what his followers should strive to do. Do in this life what is needed to be done, or in this case, pay the taxes. But that doesn't mean that you have to agree with everything Caesar does or the morality of what is done. What it does mean is that you must still live in this context that you're living in. You must still live in the world, which is not perfect, one that may cause you a lot of anxiety. As one commentator puts it, paying taxes acknowledges that Rome has political power, but not its a moral authority to rule. That moral authority belongs to God. And so right on the heels of his suggestion to pay Caesar what is Caesar's, Jesus adds that at the same time, give to God what is God's. So Caesar gets the taxes and some tacit level of obedience. And Jesus says that God gets more than this. When God is given what is God's, God gets their life. God gets their love, their full obedience. In other words, Jesus is saying, do as I am doing. Have complete and utter trust in God. Jesus later shows them this trust in his ultimate death on the cross. In saying this, Jesus tells the people all around him, listening to him, and us today, that there is something bigger out there. Something that this world and the worries in it, the obligations of it, cannot touch. Give to God your trust in this truth, says Jesus. And to me, this is why the people testing Jesus left amazed, marveled, as it says in the Greek. They had him right where they wanted him. And he delivered a message so true then and so true now that while we live in this chaotic life, sometimes full of emotion, hardship, and concern, we can trust in God. God created the world, and we are in God's kingdom. This world and God are enmeshed in each other. In all the kids' stuff, the school stuff, the job stuff, the political stuff, God is still here amongst us in all of that. It's hard to separate one from the other in our daily lives. It's intersected, it's intertwined. It is hard to see where God is sometimes and trust in God. So what happened, you may be asking? Did Porter's team win the state? The answer is yes, they did. The whole team got that coveted state ring, and it's so big it almost drags the ground as he walks around with it. It was a great celebration and something that we'll always remember. But better than that was something else that happened that year. During that year, Porter grew as a child of God. He took religion classes over the year, and his Christian faith blossomed. And with me being in the seminary, we were both studying these things like the book of Romans at the same time, for instance. We talked about God together and shared what we were learning in our classes and became even closer than we already were. With God's help, something happened to us and within us that was bigger than that state ring and all my emotion surrounding it. And so today, this text reminds me and reminds us that even though God's perfect kingdom is not yet fulfilled, we can be assured that after the issues and the problems of this world come and go, God remains. As new things emerge, God remains. When the troubles of this world weigh on us, we know that God overshadows those things. The Holy Spirit nurtures and guides us through it all. We know through Jesus Christ's crucifixion and resurrection 3 days later that as disciples of Christ, we are called to submit to the will of God and have absolute trust in God. Give to God the things that are God's. Through Jesus' amazing love for us and his act of love on the cross, Jesus gives us hope to hold on to. God urges us to trust that God will see us through the uncertainty and anxiety in which we live. Thanks be to God. Amen.